In a single afternoon, 70,000 men were slaughtered. The blood ran so deep that soldiers slipped in it as they fought. Bodies were stacked like cordwood across 9 square miles of Italian countryside. The screams were so loud they could be heard for miles. This wasn't just a battle, it was an execution, a calculated, methodical massacre. And here's the terrifying part. It was all according to plan. Every single death, every moment of terror, all of it choreographed by one of history's greatest military minds. This is the story of Cannae, the bloodiest day in ancient warfare. A battle so perfect, so devastating, that military academies still study it 2,200 years later. But this isn't just about tactics and strategy. This is about what happened when 136,000 men collided on a hot August day in southern Italy. This is about the smell of blood in the dust, the weight of armor in the summer heat, the moment when Rome's greatest army realized they had walked into a trap from which there was no escape. So settle in, because we're going deep into one of history's darkest days, and I promise you, by the end of this, you'll never think about ancient warfare the same way again. The year is 216 BC. The Roman Republic is in absolute crisis. For 2 years, a foreign general has been doing the impossible. He's been winning battles on Italian soil. Not just winning, dominating, humiliating Rome's legions in battle after battle. His name is Hannibal Barca, and he's become Rome's worst nightmare. But let's back up for a second, because you need to understand just how insane this situation is. Rome in 216 BC isn't some minor power. They're already the dominant force in the Mediterranean. They've conquered the Greek cities of southern Italy, they've beaten the Gauls, they've defeated Carthage once before in the First Punic War. Rome is a military superpower, and they know it. Their entire culture is built around warfare. Roman boys grow up dreaming of glory on the battlefield. The highest honor a Roman can achieve is a military triumph, a parade through Rome celebrating a great victory. And then Hannibal shows up. Hannibal Barca isn't just any general. He's the son of Hamilcar Barca, one of Carthage's greatest commanders. Legend says that when Hannibal was just 9 years old, his father made him swear an oath of eternal hatred toward Rome. Whether that's true or not, Hannibal has spent his entire life preparing for this war. He's fought in Spain. He's studied Roman tactics obsessively. He knows their strengths, their weaknesses, their arrogance, and he's about to use all of it against them.
In 218 BC, Hannibal does something that Romans think is impossible. He marches an army from Spain through southern France and over the Alps in winter, with war elephants. Let that sink in for a moment. He took 40,000 soldiers and 37 elephants over some of the highest, most treacherous mountains in Europe. Historians still debate the exact route he took, but we know this: it was brutal. Men froze to death. Elephants fell off cliffs. The army that emerged on the other side of the Alps was smaller, exhausted, and battered. Rome thinks he's already beaten. They think he's made a fatal mistake. They couldn't be more wrong. Hannibal descends into northern Italy and immediately starts winning. At the Trebia River in December 218 BC, he lures a Roman army into an ambush. The Romans lose 20,000 men. The survivors flee back to Rome with stories of this tactical genius who seems to predict their every move. Rome sends another army. At Lake Trasimene in 217 BC, Hannibal springs another ambush. This time, it's even worse. He positions his troops in the hills around a narrow pass by the lake. Early morning fog rolls in. The Roman army marches into the pass, and Hannibal's forces attack from all sides. The Romans are pushed into the lake. 15,000 of them drown in their armor. The Roman consul Flaminius dies in the fighting. It's one of the largest ambushes in military history. Now Rome is genuinely terrified. 2 armies destroyed, 2 consuls dead or disgraced, and Hannibal is still marching through Italy, burning farms, freeing slaves, and trying to convince Rome's allies to switch sides. The Roman Senate does something they rarely do. They appoint a dictator. His name is Fabius Maximus, and his strategy is simple. Don't fight Hannibal. Just follow him. Harass his supply lines. Let the Italian weather and lack of supplies wear him down. Avoid battle at all costs. The Romans call this strategy Fabian, after him, and it actually starts to work. Hannibal can win battles, but he can't capture Rome itself without siege equipment. He can't force Rome to surrender if they won't fight him. For months, Fabius shadows Hannibal's army, and Rome starts to think maybe they can survive this after all. But here's the problem. Romans hate this strategy. They call Fabius the delayer, and it's not a compliment. Roman culture values aggressive action, bravery, direct confrontation. Fabius's cautious approach feels cowardly. The Roman people are angry. Their farms are being burned. Their allies are wavering, and this foreigner is wandering around Italy unopposed, making Rome look weak. So, in 216 BC, when it's time to elect new consuls, Rome elects 2 men with very different ideas about how to handle Hannibal. One is Lucius Aemilius Paulus, an experienced general who thinks Fabius had the right idea. The other is Gaius Terentius Varro, a populist who promises the people what they want, a decisive battle that will crush Hannibal once and for all. And Rome gives them the tools to do it. The Senate authorizes the raising of the largest Roman army in Roman history. 8 full legions plus auxiliary forces. We're talking about 80,000 infantry and 6,000 cavalry. For context, a normal Roman army at this time would be maybe 20,000 to 30,000 men. This force is unprecedented. It's so massive that when it marches, you can see the dust clouds from miles away. The Romans are confident. How could they not be? They have numbers, they have equipment, they have the finest heavy infantry in the Mediterranean. The plan is beautifully simple. Find Hannibal, pin him down with overwhelming force, and crush him through sheer weight of numbers. It's not elegant, but it should work. Hannibal, for his part, has about 50,000 troops. He's outnumbered almost 2 to 1. He's deep in enemy territory with no reinforcements coming. Any sane general would retreat, try to break out of Italy, maybe sail back to Carthage and live to fight another day. But Hannibal isn't interested in survival. He's interested in destroying Rome. And he's been waiting for exactly this moment, the moment when Rome commits its full strength to a single battle. Because Hannibal has a plan so audacious, so perfectly executed, that military historians still can't quite believe it worked.
It's early August, 216 BC. The location is Cannae, a small town in Apulia, in the heel of Italy's boot. Hannibal has positioned his army near the town, right by the Alps River. He's taken control of a Roman supply depot there, which gives the Roman consuls a perfect excuse to attack. They're not just fighting to destroy Hannibal anymore. They need to recapture that depot. The night before the battle, both armies camp within sight of each other. Imagine what that must have been like. The Roman camp is massive, sprawling, filled with 86,000 men preparing for battle. They're sharpening swords, checking armor, writing letters home that many of them will never finish. The younger soldiers are excited, eager to prove themselves. The veterans are quieter, more focused. They've seen battle before. They know what's coming. In Hannibal's camp, the mood is different. These men know they're outnumbered. They know they're far from home, but they trust their commander absolutely. Hannibal has won every major battle he's fought against Rome, every single one. If he says he has a plan, they believe him. Hannibal calls his officers together that night. He explains what's going to happen tomorrow, and when he's done explaining, some of them think he's insane. The plan requires perfect timing, perfect discipline, and nerves of steel. It requires soldiers to stand their ground and take casualties, even when every instinct is screaming at them to run. It requires the center of his line to deliberately retreat while the flanks hold firm. One mistake, one moment of panic, and the whole thing falls apart. But Hannibal is betting everything on this plan, because he knows something that the Romans don't. He knows that the Roman way of fighting, the doctrine of the legion, contains a fatal flaw, and he's about to exploit it. August 2nd, 216 BC, dawn breaks over Cannae. The temperature is already climbing. By midday, it'll be over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The air is still, heavy with anticipation. The Roman army assembles. This takes hours because moving 86,000 men into formation is like organizing a small city. The Romans form up in their traditional triple line, hastati in front, principes behind them, triarii in the rear. But here's what's different. Varro, who has command today because the consuls alternate days, decides to make the formation deeper than usual. Instead of spreading the legions wide, he packs them tight. He's thinking about raw pushing power. He wants to smash through Hannibal's center with overwhelming force. So the Roman infantry forms up in a massive column, maybe 36,000 men across and incredibly deep. It's like a battering ram made of human beings. On the wings, Rome has its cavalry. About 2,400 Roman cavalry on the right, near the river. About 3,600 allied cavalry on the left. These aren't Rome's strength. They're outnumbered by Hannibal's horsemen, and they know it. But the plan doesn't rely on cavalry. The plan is all about that massive infantry block in the center. Across the field, Hannibal arranges his army in one of the most unusual formations in military history. His center is formed by Gallic and Spanish infantry, good warriors but not his best troops. And here's the key, he arranges them in a crescent shape that bulges toward the Romans. It's convex, curving out. This is deliberate. Hannibal wants the Romans to hit this center first. On the flanks of this crescent, he places his African veterans. These are his best infantry, experienced, disciplined, many of them wearing armor they've scavenged from dead Romans in previous battles. They're in column formation, back from the line, almost invisible in the initial deployment. On the wings, he places his cavalry. On the left, near the river, he puts his heavy cavalry, Numidian and Spanish horsemen, under the command of Hasdrubal, one of his best officers. On the right, he places his light Numidian cavalry. Hannibal's cavalry force totals about 10,000, significantly more than Rome's. If you were a Roman soldier looking at this formation, it would seem almost inviting. That bulging center looks weak, exposed. It looks like Hannibal has made a mistake, putting his weakest troops right where Rome's massive infantry block will hit them. It looks like this battle will be over quickly. The two armies face each other, maybe 400 yards of dusty Italian countryside. 136,000 men total, the largest concentration of military force the ancient world has seen up to this point. The silence before battle is broken by the sound of trumpets, war horns, and the rhythmic clashing of swords against shields as soldiers work themselves into battle fury. And then it begins. The Roman infantry advances, 80,000 men moving in unison, maintaining formation. The ground literally shakes. This isn't hyperbole. Ancient sources describe the earth trembling under their feet. The dust rises in huge clouds. The incredible sound of tramp of thousands of feet, the rattle of armor, men shouting to maintain formation. They hit Hannibal's center like a wave hitting a seawall. The Gallic and Spanish warriors in that bulging line take the initial impact. The fighting is immediate, brutal, close quarters. Swords and spears stabbing, shields bashing, men grunting, screaming, dying. The Romans are pushing hard, and it's working. Hannibal's center starts to bend backward under the pressure. But while this is happening in the center, something else is occurring on the flanks, and this is where Hannibal's genius starts to reveal itself. On the Roman right, near the river, the Roman cavalry meets Hannibal's heavy cavalry under Hasdrubal. The space is confined because of the river, which actually works in Hannibal's favor. The cavalry battle here is short and decisive. Hasdrubal's horsemen are better trained, better motivated, and they have the numbers. The Roman cavalry breaks. Some of them are killed. Most of them flee the battlefield entirely. It's over in maybe 20 minutes. On the left, the Allied cavalry is engaged with Hannibal's light Numidian horsemen. This fight lasts longer because the Numidians use hit-and-run tactics, but it serves its purpose. It keeps the Roman Allied cavalry occupied and unable to help the infantry. So now the Roman cavalry on the right is destroyed and the cavalry on the left is tied up. The Roman infantry is completely exposed on both flanks. But they don't know this yet, because they're focused on what's happening in front of them, and what's happening in front of them feels like victory. The Roman center keeps pushing. Hannibal's crescent keeps bending backward. The Gauls and Spaniards are fighting hard, but they're being driven back step by step. The crescent that bulged toward the Romans is now flattening out. Then it starts to curve the other way, becoming concave. The Romans are pushing so deep into Hannibal's line that they're creating a U-shape in his line. The Roman soldiers can feel it. They're winning. They're pushing the enemy back. Just a little more pressure and the whole Carthaginian line will break. Varro and Paulus are probably thinking their plan is working perfectly. And then the trap springs shut. Those African veterans that Hannibal positioned on the flanks, back from the line in column formation, they've been waiting for this moment. As the Romans push deeper into the U, the African infantry wheels inward. Suddenly, the Romans aren't just fighting to their front, they're being attacked from both sides. Hasdrubal's heavy cavalry, having destroyed the Roman cavalry on the right, doesn't pursue the fleeing horsemen. Instead, in a move that shows incredible discipline and command control, they ride around the back of the entire battle. They cross behind the Roman lines and attack the Roman allied cavalry from behind. That cavalry force, already struggling against the Numidians, collapses completely. Now Hasdrubal's cavalry wheels around again and closes the trap from behind. The Romans are completely surrounded, encircled. Every direction they look, there are enemy troops closing in. Even taking the lower estimate, it's catastrophic. For comparison, that's more American combat deaths than in the entire Vietnam War, except this happened in one afternoon on a battlefield about 3 miles by 3 miles. Another 10,000 Romans are captured. Many of them are wounded. Hannibal's forces stripped the dead of armor and weapons. The sight must have been apocalyptic. Bodies as far as the eye can see, blood soaking into the dry Italian soil, the cries of the wounded echoing across the field. The aftermath is almost worse than the battle. The ancient sources describe scenes that are hard to read. Wounded men hiding among the corpses, trying to stay alive until nightfall. Carthaginian soldiers walking among the bodies, finishing off the wounded, looking for valuables. The sound of men begging for water, for help, for mercy. One account describes Roman soldiers who had buried themselves in the ground up to their necks to hide, only to be found and trampled by Carthaginian cavalry. Another describes wounded men trying to drink blood from the ground because they were so thirsty. These might be exaggerations by later historians, but they give you a sense of how traumatic this battle was in Roman memory. Hannibal's own losses, about 6,000 men, mostly the Gauls and Spanish who bore the brunt of the Roman assault in the center. It's an almost unbelievable casualty ratio. For every Carthaginian soldier killed, more than 10 Romans died. That night in the Carthaginian camp, their celebration, they've just achieved what might be the most perfect tactical victory in military history. Hannibal's officers are urging him to march on Rome immediately. One of them famously tells Hannibal, "You know how to win a victory, but you do not know how to use it."
Hannibal refuses to march on Rome. This decision will be debated for the next 2,200 years. Some historians think he made a fatal mistake, that Rome was defenseless and he should have struck. Others argue he was right to be cautious. Rome's walls were formidable. He had no siege equipment. His army was exhausted. And even after Cannae, Rome still had other armies in the field, still had fortified cities full of soldiers. In Rome, the news arrives like a thunderbolt. At first, people don't believe it. The Senate tries to suppress the initial reports, but survivors start trickling in, and the truth can't be hidden. Rome has lost its largest army. The consuls are dead or fled. The list of casualties includes some of Rome's most prominent families. The city goes into mourning, but it's a strange kind of mourning. The Senate passes laws limiting the period of public grief. They can't allow the city to fall into despair. They need people focused on survival, not sorrow. Women are forbidden from crying in public for more than 30 days. It sounds cruel, but Rome is fighting for its existence. And here's where you see what makes Rome different from other ancient powers. Most nations, when they lose 70,000 men in a single battle, when their largest army is annihilated, when enemy forces are wandering through their territory unopposed, they surrender, they negotiate, they make peace on whatever terms they can get.
Rome doesn't. The Senate makes a decision that will define Roman character for the next 500 years. No surrender, no negotiation, no peace until Hannibal is driven from Italy. They refuse to ransom the captured soldiers. This is particularly harsh. About 10,000 Romans are prisoners of war. Hannibal offers to sell them back. Roman families are begging the Senate to pay, but the Senate refuses. The message is clear. We don't reward defeat. We don't negotiate with our enemies. If you're captured, you're on your own. It's brutal, but it's also strategic. Rome is telling Hannibal and anyone else watching, you can kill our armies, burn our fields, defeat us in battle after battle, but we will never quit. And then they do something incredible. They raise another army. Actually, they raise several. They drop the property requirements for military service, allowing poor Romans to enlist. They free slaves and arm them. They're scraping together every available man who can hold a sword. They also make a strategic decision: no more big battles. They go back to Fabius's strategy of harassment and delay. Follow Hannibal's army, attack his supply lines, avoid major engagements. It's frustrating, it feels cowardly to the Roman temperament, but after Cannae, they don't have a choice. Hannibal spends the next few years trying to break Rome's alliances. He marches through southern Italy, and some cities do defect to him. Capua, one of the largest cities in Italy, switches sides. So do some Greek cities in the south. But most of Rome's allies remain loyal, either of loyalty or fear. Without siege equipment and reinforcements, Hannibal can't capture Rome itself. He can't force a decisive end to the war. The conflict drags on year after year: 214 BC, 213 BC, 212 BC. Hannibal keeps winning battles, but he's not winning the war. Rome starts going on the offensive in other theaters. They send armies to Spain to cut off Hannibal's reinforcements and supplies. They fight in Sicily. They're bleeding, but they're not broken. In 207 BC, Hannibal's brother Hasdrubal tries to bring reinforcements from Spain, crossing the Alps just like Hannibal did years before. But the Romans intercept him at the Metaurus River in northern Italy. Hasdrubal's army is destroyed, and he's killed. The Romans take his severed head and catapult it into Hannibal's camp. It's a brutal message: no help is coming. Hannibal knows the war in Italy is lost. He stays for a few more years, but in 203 BC, he's recalled to Carthage to defend against a Roman invasion of North Africa. The hunter has become the hunted. In 202 BC, at the Battle of Zama, Hannibal faces a Roman army commanded by Scipio Africanus. Scipio has studied Hannibal's tactics obsessively. At Zama, Scipio uses Hannibal's own strategies against him.
The Romans win decisively. Hannibal, who never lost a major battle in Italy, loses his first and last major defeat. Carthage sues for peace. The terms are harsh. They have to pay huge reparations, give up their navy, and promise never to make war without Roman permission. It's the effective end of Carthage as a great power. Hannibal lives for another 20 years, working as a statesman, then going into exile when Rome pressures Carthage to hand him over. He ends up in the eastern Mediterranean, still trying to organize resistance to Rome. In 183 BC, when Roman agents finally track him down in Bithynia, Hannibal takes poison rather than be captured. His last words are reportedly, "Let us relieve the Romans from the anxiety they have so long experienced, since they think it tries their patience too much to wait for an old man's death." Rome goes on to become the greatest empire the ancient world ever saw, but they never forget Cannae. For the next 700 years, Roman mothers will frighten their children with stories of Hannibal. Hannibal ad portas, or Hannibal is at the gates, becomes a phrase Romans use to describe any existential threat. So what makes Cannae so significant? Why do military historians still study it thousands of years later? First, it's the perfect demonstration of the double envelopment, surrounding your enemy on all sides. It's incredibly difficult to pull off. You need your flanks to be strong enough to hold and then push inward while your center is being hammered. You need perfect timing. You need your troops to maintain discipline even when they're being pushed back. One mistake and the whole thing falls apart. Hannibal executed it perfectly, and generals have been trying to recreate it ever since. During the Napoleonic Wars, commanders studied Cannae. In World War I, the German Schlieffen Plan was influenced by Cannae's principles of envelopment. Norman Schwarzkopf cited Cannae as inspiration for the left hook maneuver in the Gulf War.
But there's another reason Cannae matters. It shows that superior numbers aren't everything. The Romans had almost double Hannibal's forces. They had better equipment, better heavy infantry, and they were fighting on their home territory. And they lost catastrophically because Hannibal outthought them. He turned their strength, that massive deep formation, into a weakness by trapping it and grinding it down. Cannae also matters because of Rome's response. Most nations would have collapsed after such a defeat. Rome didn't. They adapted, persevered, and eventually won. Cannae taught Rome the limits of their traditional tactics. They had to evolve, had to become more flexible in their thinking. The Roman military that conquered the Mediterranean in the following centuries was forged in the disaster at Cannae. There's also a darker lesson here about the nature of warfare. 70,000 men died in a few hours. Most of them were young men who had never wanted to be at Cannae in the first place. They were farmers, artisans, fathers, sons. They died terrified, crushed together, probably not even understanding what had gone wrong. War historians can admire Hannibal's tactical brilliance, but we should also remember the human cost. Each of those 70,000 deaths was a person with hopes, fears, family, dreams. The field at Cannae is quiet now. It's farmland. Wheat grows where men once bled. There's a small monument, but nothing that really captures the scale of what happened there. Archaeologists have found mass graves in the area, thousands of bones, many showing signs of violent trauma. It's a reminder that beneath the strategy and the tactics and the grand historical narrative, war is about flesh and blood and pain. Every year, military cadets at West Point, Sandhurst, and other academies around the world study the Battle of Cannae. They learn about Hannibal's genius, about the importance of maneuver over brute force, about the dangers of predictability. These are good lessons. But maybe the most important lesson of Cannae isn't about military tactics. Maybe it's about hubris. Rome was so confident in their superiority, so certain that their way of fighting was the best, that they walked into a trap with their eyes open. They ignored warnings. They rejected caution. They thought their numbers and their courage would be enough. And 70,000 of them paid for that arrogance with their lives. So where does that leave us? What should we take away from this story of blood and dust and tactical genius? Maybe this: war is the ultimate test of leadership, planning, and human courage. Cannae shows us how one brilliant mind can defeat overwhelming force through preparation and insight. But it also shows us the cost. Every statistic in military history represents a real person. Every casualty was someone's child, someone's friend. Hannibal won the perfect battle. Rome won the war, and history remembers both. If you found this deep dive into ancient warfare fascinating, hit that like button and subscribe for more history that goes beyond the surface level. Drop a comment and let me know, could any modern army pull off a Cannae today? Or have technology and tactics evolved too much? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for sticking with me through this 30-minute journey into one of history's darkest days. I'll see you in the next one.